ब्रह्मचारी जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव जय जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकचर्य अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमाद His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada की जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकचर्य अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमाद His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी हरि हरि बोल. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, the Summon Bonum, Chapter 38, Akrura's Arrival in Vrindavan, text number 27. Deham vritam ijan arto hitvadam bham bijam shusham Sandeshajyo hare lingam darshana sravanadibhi deham vritan ijanartho hitvadam bham bijam sucham Sandeshajyo hare linga darshana sravanadibhi deham bhritan ijanarto hitvadam bhambijam sucham shandeshajo harer linga darshana sravanadibhi. Please chant, Prabhu. Deham bridam idam arto hitvadam bandijam sucham sandesajo hare linga darshana shravanadibhi. Deham britham, of embodied beings, of embodied beings. Ijam, this much, artha, the goal of life, hitva, giving up, dambham, pride, bhijam, fear, sucham, and sorrow, sandeshat, beginning from his being order by Kamsa, Jaha, which, Harehe, of Lord Krishna, Linga, the signs, Darshana, with the seeing, Shravana, hearing about, Adibihi, and so on. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The very goal of life for all embodied beings is this ecstasy, which Akrura experienced when, upon receiving Kamsa's order, he put aside all pride, fear, and lamentation, and absorbed himself in seeing, hearing, and describing the things that reminded him of Lord Krishna. Purport. This is from the BBT. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that Akrura gave up fear by openly showing his love and reverence for Krishna. Even though he or his families may have been punished by angry Kamsa, Akrura gave up his pride in being an aristocratic member of society and worshipped the cowherd residents of the simple village of Vrindavan. And he gave up lamenting for his house, wife, and family, which were in danger from King Kamsa. Giving up all these things, he rolled in the doors of the lotus feet of God. Deham britam ijam darto hitvadamban bijam sucham sandeshat jo hare linga darshana sravanadibhi. The very goal of life for all embodied beings is this ecstasy which Akrura experienced when, upon receiving Kamsa's order, he put aside all pride, fear, and lamentation, and absorbed himself in seeing, hearing, and describing the things that reminded him of Lord Krishna. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaja Chakshur Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaho. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Ramapad Swami Niti Namine. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gaura Bani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashatyade Shatarine Pancha Kalpatarubhyasha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Is just appreciating how wonderful is to read the Srimad Bhagavatam. Is almost every verse is just so much nectar and so much instructions. It's wonderful to hear the prayers of Akrura. And the circumstances in which Akrura finds himself in being in the association and in the service of such a demoniac person, so opposed to Krishna. And still, in that very unfavorable condition and situation, he was able to fully connect and absorb himself in the service of Krishna, pure devotional service. So it's always quite wonderful. It's the same when you, through the Bhagavatam, the story of so many great devotees who have to go to so many tribulations, and in spite of all the circumstances, they always come to that perfect shelter. And in that perfect shelter, they're always transcendental. You know, Prahlad Maharaj, Yudhishthira Maharaj, Parikshit Maharaj, so many. It's quite wonderful. So in this case, we're hearing now Srila Sukadev Goswami appreciating 27. Yeah, thank you, bro. He is appreciating Akrura's prayers and also highlighting the qualities that were necessary that Akrura was able the qualities that he had in order to be able to experience the ecstasy of love of Godhead that he was experiencing. Because the ecstasy that is described here is the ecstasy that happens when Akrura was able to see the footprints of Krishna and Balaram in the sand of Vrindavan. And this ecstasy of love of Godhead erupted. So, how is that he was experiencing this ecstasy? Srila Sukadev Goswami is explaining in this verse. The fact that this ecstasy was led, what is said here, is that he started to enter into that ecstasy that basically exploded in his full in full when Akrura saw the footprints and he wrote in the sand. But everything started with Kamsa's order. In the beginning of the chapter, Kamsa, the previous chapter, Kamsa's ordering Akrura. And Kamsa, if we remember, he was telling Akrura all his plan, the plan that he had for killing Krishna. So he was saying, you bring him, and then when he arrived here, the mad elephant Kulayapida is going to be waiting, and will kill him. And if even he escaped this elephant, then he had the plan for Mustika and Chanura. So, but upon receiving this order, he started to experience the ecstasy. And what was this ecstasy? That he became absorbed in hearing and describing everything that reminded him of Krishna. So he had this absorption in Krishna, fully. Now I'm going to read, because it's very interesting, there's some things that are mentioned by our acharyas to enter a little more into some of the important points of this verse, and specifically, what do you need to do to qualify to enter into this ecstasy? Into the ecstasy of constantly being, to be completely absorbed in the process of hearing and chanting. Shravana Adibhi. So the qualifications that Srila Sukadeva Goswami described here is giving up hitva dambam bijam sucham. Then one have to give up these three things: pride, fear, and lamentation. Pride, fear, and lamentation. If we eliminate those, if we give up those fully, then we can enter into the ecstasy of being fully absorbed in Krishna, in the messages of Krishna. Saying it in the other way, if these are present, then we cannot enter into that ecstasy. Right? Or to the degree that these things are present, they're going to be putting obstacles in the consistent absorption. So it is explained that when in the neophyte stages of devotional service, we have this mix. It's like a roller coaster. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti described there is this sort of upside down devotion. Is anishtata bhakti. The bhakti is not consistent. You're not consistently in that space of absorption, but you go in and you go out. And the reason we go in and out is because the presence of these things: pride, fear, lamentation. So one have to fully eliminate these things. But now this pride, fear, and lamentation are connected to our bodily conception of life. The particular designations or upadhis that we have of ourselves. The particular condition that this body puts into our thinking, feeling, willing, acting, everything. We're conditioned. As long as we're conditioned, as long as we think in terms of the body, or being influenced by the body, then we're going to be experiencing these things: pride, fear, and lamentation. So let's see what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said. After describing the actions of Akrura's body, words, and mind, from his starting the journey in Mathura until his entrance in Braja, the conclusion is given in this verse. As Akrura gave up all false pride on seeing the footprints and roll on the ground. This is the goal of human life. He gave up all the pride, hitva bandham, such as, quote, "How can I, Akrura, minister of the king, worshipped by the king, rolled in the dust of a cowherd boy. End of quote. He gave up fear of Kamsa, being angry for rolling in the dust of Krishna, his enemy. He gave up lamentation, Suchan, concerning the destruction of his wife, children, and house by angry Kamsa. Giving up the fear can also mean giving up fear of criticism for friends. Giving up lamentation can mean giving up the following considerations. Quote, as we are born in good families with power, respected by all, how can we roll in the dust of the Vaishyas who are low, penniless, dressed in worn clothes, disrespected by all others? End of quote. The wise men, on seeing the Vaishnava with tilak and garland and marks of the Lord on his body, should roll in the dust of his feet. The phrase, giving up pride, fear, and lamentation can be a reference to the ordinary man, but not applicable to a Krura. So, it appears that there's a contradiction here. But from the ordinary space, the point here that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is expressing here, in how I understand it, is that a Krura is not an ordinary person. There is no, so the way a Krura experience all the symptoms is not like the position of ordinary persons trying to deal with their pride, their fears, and their lamentation. So we should not make the mistake of trying to understand a Krura's process from the perspective of our experience, as conditioned souls. So again, the phrase giving up pride, fear, and lamentation can be referenced to the ordinary man, but not applicable to a Krura. Hearing and remembering the glories of Hari from Narada, a Krura had a desire to serve the Lord in Dasya Ras. Quote, when will I serve Hari in this way? And when will I get the good fortune to see him? End of quote. This should be the desire of the devotee. So one thing that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur tells us here that I was not aware is that Akrura learned about Krishna from Narada. So it seems, what Narada Muni will do, especially the part that he plays in Krishna's pastime, because recently we were listening to my spiritual master discussing the marriage of Krishna and Rukmini. And Rukmini became very attractive and gave her heart to Krishna just by hearing about Krishna from great sages, especially Narada Muni. So Narada Muni seems to be, in those circles of all these wonderful associates of Lord Krishna, just narrating Krishna's qualities and Krishna's pastimes. And by narrating those pastimes, all these highly elevated personalities, they immediately, their heart becomes, fully given to Krishna. So this was the case of Akrura. He also heard from Narada, and that all that association, all that hearing, all that attraction, when it came the moment that he got the instruction from Kamsa, you go and pick Krishna. It means that he was going to actually have the direct association with Krishna. Finally, he will see Krishna. Finally, he can actually, surrender to Krishna. So it is said here in this verse that at that moment, then he gave up pride, fear, and lamentation. Because that was the moment that he was going to basically achieve his desired goal, which was, to have Krishna's association and to be able to surrender to Krishna, fully giving himself to Krishna, the person, in that connection. So it's very wonderful. Srila Jiva Goswami comments, in relating how Akrura raw in the food thus, Sukadev praises Akrura because of his intense bhakti. This is the goal for those having bodies. Otherwise, the body is useless. The statement that after giving up pride, fear, and anxiety, this goal arises. Fear and anxiety, this goal arises, applies to Akrura as well. I'm going to read that again. The statement that after giving up pride, fear, and anxiety, this goal arises, applies to Akrura as well. So the goal of the intense bhakti, the full absorption. So Srila Jiva Goswami is explaining that when these things are overcome, pride, fear, and anger, pride, fear, and he says here, pride, fear, and anxiety, then that's when you're able to enter into that ecstasy of full absorption, the intense bhakti of full absorption. Akrura gave up pride as illustrated in verse 18. Quote, the infallible omniscient Lord will, I hope, not consider me an enemy, even though Kamsa has sent me here as his messenger. End of quote. Though pride did not manifest, he had cause for lamentation and fear since his friends were being persecuted by Kamsa. But in front of Krishna, who had appeared to protect his family, there was no cause for becoming overcome by lamentation and fear. Verse 26 stated that he experienced increasing bliss on seeing the footprints. Kachit Buddha swasti anamiva ashte swapalka putro bhagavat prapana ya Krishna padankita margapan pansusu achestata prema vivina daira. Quote, how is wise, senseless Akrura surrendered to the Lord, who, losing control out of strong prema, roll in the dusty path marked by the footprints of Krishna. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, text number 32. That was the question. How did it happen that he completely lost control out of a strong prema and rolled in the dusty path marked by footprints? It's like, just imagine the scene. This powerful personality, quite elderly, so it was a statement, was, a royalty. And with all the presence and the power of royalty, and you see the person all of a sudden rolling in the ground of Vrindavan, in the dasa of Vrindavan. When we visit Vrindavan, imagine the shock of the scene of seeing a person like this, just like a madman rolling in the ground in ecstasy. So how does that happen? One can only imagine. So the question is very appropriate. He could not react in this way if all sorrow had not been removed. Instead of suchan, the word is sukam, is also sin. In order to bring the chariot into Gokula, after rolling in the dust, he again mounted it. For it is mentioned in verse 34 that again he dismounted to bow to Krishna and Balaram. And finally, I read Srila Sanatana Goswami's comment on this verse. It's a little similar, but it has some also variety. In relating how Akrura roll in the foot does, Sukadev praises Akrura because of his intense bhakti. This is the goal of those having bodies, otherwise the body is useless. He put aside all pride, fear, and lamentation. This is the general description. In prema, such qualities are not actually present. Damba means falsity. Also, the translation from Damba is pride. So, falsity, pride. Lamentation is caused by separation from things one treasures. One experiences fear because of a wicked people. If these are present, he could not roll in the ground. Thus, it is said that he gave this up. Or is it meant as an instruction? Giving up is recommended because of the wealth of prema. Harer means of he who attracts the mind. He absorbed himself in hearing, seeing, and the symbols, linga. Remembering and chanting are also included, and also serving as a messenger, sandesat. Or, the goal of these living entities is rolling on the earth in prema, iyam. What was his verbal service? It is chanting such as verse 26. Linga can also mean the deity form. Chanting, however, is the main process since he was filled with prema. Later, he mounted the chariot to bring it into Gokula. In verse 34, it is described that he then dismounted the chariot. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a very similar verse that describes this. Is a very similar. It describes. There's a slight difference, but they're very much connected. It's in the 4th chapter. It's the verse that follow. Jamma karma chamedivyam verse, no? Jamma karma chamedivyam even yoveti tattvataha tyakta deham punarjamma neiti man eti sarjuna. That in a nutshell, what is transcendental knowledge? And so, which is the title of the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, what is that transcendental knowledge? Is to fully understand in truth the divinity of Krishna's appearance and Krishna's activities. So when one actually comes to understand that in truth, then one is guaranteed, one is liberated. One is qualified to be liberated. So that is equal equated to this ecstasy of being fully absorbed. If one is fully understanding Krishna's position in truth, in full, then one naturally enters into this space of full absorption, on the space of, prema. And in the following verse from this Jamma Karma Chevedivyan, then Krishna says this Vita, Raga, Bhaja, Krodha. So, three things: Vita, Raga, Bhaja, and Krodha. Mammaya, Man Upashrita, Bahabo Gyanata Pasha, Putamat, Bhavan Agata. So, being free from attachment, fear, and anger. Being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus obtained transcendental love for me. So, in today's verse is pride, and also Srila Sanatana Goswami translates as falsity. So pride or falsity, fear and lamentation. And in this case, Krishna mentioned attachments, Vita, Raga, Bhaja, fear, and Krodha, anger. So when these things are eliminated and overcome, then one can enter into this full absorption in Krishna. So the commentary on this verse in the Bhagavad Gita by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti is very telling also. I read it. Not only at the present time can one obtain me just by knowing about the nature of my present birth and activities, Krishna is speaking in this case, but in ancient times, also in previous kalpas, when I appear, people obtain me by knowing the nature of my birth and activities. That is the purport of this verse. Regarding the meaning of Jnana Tapasa, Ramanujacharya says, quote, they became purified by the austerity of realization about the nature of my birth and activities as previously stated. So, in one sense, this is the same thing that Krishna is explaining to Arjuna in the 4th chapter, the importance of transcendental knowledge. By transcendental knowledge, as we cultivate transcendental knowledge, then naturally, one becomes free, one becomes purified, one becomes free from all these different things, pride or lamentation, fear, or in this case, attachments, fear and anger. So, and what is that? What is the activity that is highlighted here is Jnana Tapasa, is the austerities that come from the practices of transcendental knowledge, the cultivation of transcendental knowledge. So that transcendental knowledge in itself arrives by the process of devotional service, of which the main elements that we're given is the process of Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. But any of the process of devotional service will automatically bring out the natural knowledge and renunciation. Now we hear that from Srila Sutta Goswami, famous verse, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Jnana Jatyatsu Ashu Vairagya comes naturally, and Jnanancha Yat Ahaitukam. So both Vairagya and Jnana comes as a result of practicing this Param Dharma, which is a devotional service to a Dakshaya. What is it? Sabai Punsam Paro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Adokshage. Yato Bhaktir Adokshage. Bhakti to Adoksha, to the Supreme Lord. So naturally, by this devotional service, knowledge. And in knowledge, with knowledge, there is this Jnana Tapasa. And with this Jnana Tapasa, we naturally become purified and free from these things. And when the purification is completed, when we're fully free from all the things, then we can start to experience the, devotional service, pure devotional service. And that's, another famous verse of Krishna, Brahma Bhuta Prashanatma Na Sochati Na Kanchati. No lamentation, no hankering. And in that stage, Mad Bhakti Labate Param. That devotional service starts. That's the beginning of pure devotional service. So one can enter into, these stages of bhava and then eventually prema. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti continue. Regarding the meaning of Jnana Tapasa, Ramanujacharya says, they become purified by the austerity of realization about the nature of my birth and activities, as previously stated. Or, this is very interesting, or the meaning can be, quote, they, having obtained realization of the eternal nature of my birth and activities, became purified by austerity in the form of tolerating the burning poison of wrong ideas. Try something, no? I read it again. They, having obtained realization of the eternal nature of my birth and activity, became purified by austerity in the form of tolerating the burning poison of wrong ideas, wrong logic, and wrong arguments. Ramanujacharya quotes the following Shruti in this regard: Tasya Dira Parijananti Yonim. The wise men know about the Lord's method of birth. Taittiriya Aranyaka Upanishad 3.13.1. Such wise person has given up attachment to or affection for persons who speak nonsense ideas. Vitaraga. My devotees have no fear of them, no anger towards them. Why? Because they are all preoccupied by meditating on, thinking of, hearing and singing about the birth, my birth and my activities. Mammaya. They obtain prema for me. Mad Bhavan. Quite wonderful, no? It's nice. I mean, one of the aspects that is very nice in being together like we do, to hear Bhagavatam together is also to discuss Bhagavatam together. So, let's do it again. And it's nice to keep it in a way that is always brings happiness to the heart. You know, how's machita magata pranas bodajantas parasparam is tusyanti cha ramanti cha. That is very, very nourishing and enlightening. You know, it touches your heart. So with that mood, we can refine how we do, because you know the idea here is that we appreciate each other, you know, as devotees, because the fact is that all of us here present in this, we like very much to come together and hear Bhagavatam. Is something that is naturally there, and we can appreciate that very much in each other and share that. So with that in mind, let's have questions and answers, and we'll see how that works. See a microphone? Saves too much volume to it too. I think Jai Baladev is number 1. Yeah, bring it down. Okay. Yes, Prabhu.
Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. As you were mentioning, when we are purified, we come to understand transcendental knowledge. So Karma Yoga is like fruitive activities, but engage in Krishna service. So it's a stepwise, like Karma, then you get purified with Jnana Yoga,
right.
Then Dhyana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Right? So in Karma Yoga, when you do work as for the pleasure of Krishna, it's not a process of, it's like not you are on the transcendental platform, it's like on the way.
I think there's a yoga ladder that is in the Vedic system, that you know there's this there's these different levels, you know, that there's not necessarily devotional service. So you go from this Karma Kanda section, and in one sense, at one point, you may be able to do some Sakam Karma Yoga. You have a motivation for it. Or there's Jnana Yoga, that you cultivate the studies of the Shastras and this and that, you know, like.
No, I was not saying Karma Kanda. One is Karmi, like, and another is Karma Yoga. Like, you perform your work, but you do for the pleasure of Krishna. So you have fruity mentality, but you're doing it in the service of the Lord, like that.
Yeah, the thing is that Krishna doesn't make a distinction, you know, it's all bhakti. So it's like in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is Karma Yoga, actions in Krishna consciousness, right? So it's all bhakti because it's under the umbrella of service to Krishna. It's just for different levels. So the way I understood it in my limited capacity, in the 6th chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna, when in discussing Dhyana Yoga, and he just explained Karma Yoga to him. So tells Arjuna that you're not qualified for doing dhyana yoga. You're qualified for acting, for doing this karma yoga process at the devotional service that he explains. Why? Because you still, as long as you have desires and attachments, you cannot practice this other one. You will be making a display, or you'll be making that it will be false. So then you're qualified for this other one. So, but it's the same principle that is explained. So, if we have attachments, we're still going to have to go to some purification, because attachments, they are the cause of all these different fears and pride and lamentation, all the things. And in mixed devotional service, we experience those things. We experience becoming frustrated and angry. We experience, having some pride at times, like that. We experience all these things. We experience lamentation, we experience fear, and these things become an obstacle for us, and that's part of the things that we become purified by the practice. So, same jnana yoga, as Krishna explains it, is in the Bhagavad Gita, is all devotional service. It's all bhakti. It's just, different levels of bhakti. Is that addressed then?
You were describing, as the verse was saying, that Akura gave up his pride and lamentation and fear. And the purport described what the sources of those three, emotions or states of mind are. And you were describing that that those things have to be given up in order to enter into this realm of ecstatic love with Lord Krishna. So it seems for Akura it was the impetus was there to do that by virtue of the fact that he knew he was going to be personally having darshan of Krishna. He was also cultivating remembering Krishna and worshipping him as soon as he knew he was going to see Krishna. So in some sense, regular devotees are also meditating that they're going to come to a point of seeing Krishna, so to speak. And so we're also following all the rules and regulations and attempting to perform worship of Krishna. In actual fact, it seems then that the giving up of pride and fear and lamentation, it's a kind of gradual thing through the process of worshipping Krishna, but it seems in Akura's case he was already in a very advanced state that just little remnants could drop away. Is that correct?
Correct. And that's what I understood too. That's why I think it was Srila Jiva Goswami or Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti that said this doesn't apply to him. These ordinary people, you have to deal with the whole dirty stuff, of these things. But with Akura was already absorbed. He already have the desire just by hearing about Krishna. From Narada, he already had, and then whatever was there that he was hesitating, when he came the order of Kamsa, you go and pick Krishna. Pick Krishna. just Krishna. He would go to Vrindavan to see Krishna. Then, then he, immediately he got into this. It was like he entered into this space, like intense bhakti. And we hear from the moment that he's leaving is this ecstasy and absorption that it gets more and more intense, and it really exploded when he saw the footprints. So it's a wonderful description like that. Yes, yeah, I think so. Jai Baladev Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you for your class. You were mentioning transcendental knowledge. I forgot the point related to that, but basically we hear transcendental knowledge should be heard from the right source, generally speaking. But we hear the pastime in the Anshalila chapter 5 where Pradyumna Mishra went to Lord Chaitanya and he says, give me transcendental knowledge, tell me about Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya says, I do not know anything about Krishna, go to Ramananda Roy. So we see in this pastime that although the Lord knows everything, he acts like he doesn't know anything. We're the opposite. So my other point is that basically, generally in the material, we see that Lord Chaitanya says, don't come to me, go to him. And therefore he glorifies devotees. In the material world, we more often hear where people say, don't go to him, come to me. Therefore we criticize devotees. So how do we know? Because we see Prabhupada criticize the Mayavadis, he criticized so many people. How do we know our criticism is justified, or if it falls in a category of pride, which we were mentioning, or aparaz, Vaishnava aparaz? How do we know if it's justified or falls in the category of pride and aparaz?
We can almost make we can always make the assumption that is mixed, that definitely we're communicating through the condition of this body, so what comes out is going to be colored by my false ego. It's almost an assumption that is there. So therefore we have to be very thoughtful and mindful and not fully trust. I mean, sometimes nature will force you to say something, and then you take your notes. Once you see what comes out, you can take a note and say, well, maybe I acted a little too much here with my false ego or with some pride. And if we're able to step back and be able to see that maybe I was a little too prideful, then I can come to the person and say, I'm sorry, I did, I spoke, I overstepped myself, like this. So you recognize, we can make that assumption ourselves. We don't have to fully trust necessarily my, perceptions. If I understand where I'm at, if I understand that I'm a conditioned soul, that I'm trying hard to become purified, but also I have to see that among the people that are the circle that I am, I'm in the circle of devotees who are also doing the same thing. So we have to try to keep that in mind. Now, our case is, we're ordinary devotees. In the case of highly advanced personalities, and what to speak in the case of Srila Prabhupada, who is, a Shaktivesh avatar, or, an empowered personality devotee of the Lord, that's a different thing. Then their criticism is not criticism. They're actually doing something that is absolutely for the benefit. So that's why when we look to advanced devotees, to our spiritual master, or to advanced Vaishnavas, we can actually have faith that their criticism or the so-called criticism or so-called, these are instructions that are given to us. Sometimes it may be that we may not be even to understand, it appears that it's not just. It appears with highly, high elevated personalities in their dealings, it appears that it's not just. But we have to have faith that is perfect. And then if we have that faith, then we are forced to see, okay, if there's no mistake with my, my spiritual authorities, then there have to be something in me that I have to be, and then I have to look inside, and then I may be able to find things. Oh, this lamentation or this fear, this attachment, these things, and then one progress. In our case, we really have to be in our level, or most of us, we have to be very mindful that that indeed we are negotiating in one sense my false ego with the false ego of my fellow devotees, and we're trying to sort of work together, appreciate each other, understand each other, sometimes tolerate each other, sometimes be patient with each other. Sometimes, sometimes I may give a little more, sometimes I may receive a little more. So in our space it's like that. We're very thoughtful. Very thoughtful. It's better like that. I'm going to stop here. I thank you very much for your association, and Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.